the importance of data security. The goal of the Capstone project is multifaceted, with the overarching theme consisting of discovering data and the ways it can be utilized. The idea is to create a reasonable amount of information, attempt to blindly find as much of it as possible, use it for malicious purposes. By the end, we hope to both determine and illustrate the amount of data that is created and why this data creation should be monitored. So for the first section is fake identity creation. This section is all about the creation of our fake online persona. This is where we created the main email, and then from there we created several accounts under different social media platforms, such as Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, and Twitter. We made a few posts on each of these platforms, as well as following several accounts related to our person's interests, such as the NBA superstars or popular video game developers. We also signed up for several newsletters with our central email account. These posts and newsletter subscriptions were generally centered around sports such as NFL, NBA, and NHL. Our second section is about the open source intelligence portion of our project. This is where we scouted for more information based off the single given account. We would use tools such as Maltego to find more information on our created person and would then build graphics to illustrate what information was found relating to them. Once we finished collecting data, we would move on to the next step in our process. And in our third and final section is social engineering. Here we would gather up all the information we had gathered on our created person and then engineer an attack crafted specifically for them. In this case, we would send our created person an email that would center around some or one of his interests in hopes that they would open a malicious link inside the email. The link itself is harmless and is just used to show what could happen if the payload was real. So for our limitations, the first one, a little goes a long way. We wanted to strike the right balance of data created. We are creating a realistic interpretation of the average person. It'd be unrealistic if they posted a mass amount at once, but not so little that meaningful data cannot be gathered. 2, divide and conquer. Responsibilities were separated. The team member chosen to conduct OSINT operations will not be made aware of any account information aside from one social media account to start out with until after. 3, tempering expectations. One of the biggest things to keep in mind, like with rule number 1, is that only so much data can be created. While work will be put in to find the right amount of data, it is duly important to remember that it may not be as much as an identity that has been online for several months or years. And finally, operating on a budget. We try to complete this project without having spent any money on products or services. This includes the community edition of Maltego and a previously owned copy of the OSINT book. Because only free options are used, some are a bit more limited than their paid counterparts. Now for the false identity creation. Jonathan Smith, born on December 1st, 2000, is currently a senior in Ferris State University's Information Security and Intelligence program. His hobbies include playing basketball, football, hockey, and video games, along with watching them at the professional level. The image shown here is not a real person. They don't exist. Jonathan was procedurally generated by artificial intelligence. There may be someone out there that looks similar to Jonathan, but he is a uniquely generated face and could likely fool anybody. And for the account management, Jonathan, like most people, is present on several social media platforms, including Twitter, Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok is where Jonathan can be found, whether that be by a friend of his or someone who's gathering information on him for other reasons. Jonathan is really interested in sports like basketball, hockey, and football, and his online activity and interest in these things is visible to anyone with an internet connection. Jonathan's followed accounts and posts provide lots of information for someone interested in engineering an attack catered to Jonathan's interests. And then we have our initial fake identity graph using Maltego. So we knew his name was Jonathan Smith, and from there we knew he attended Ferris State University. He lives in Big Rapids because of that. We also found his Twitter handle, which is Jonathan406 guy, and then Jonathan Smith 406, which was linked to several things like his Facebook, his email, his TikTok, Instagram, even a couple of newsletters he was subscribed to. And then finally, we were able to find his Snapchat username.
All right, and so switching perspectives here, now that our information has been created, we're really looking to kind of see what is able to be found specifically with OSINT or open source intelligence gathering methods. Now, to be able to accomplish this, our session had really included three major tools, that being the Open Source Intelligence Techniques book, the ninth edition specifically, as it was the one that I had owned at the time, as well as the Hunchly and Meltigo applications. So looking at the graph itself, we had really been able to establish several avenues for the social engineering section, which was really the primary purpose of this OSINT section. So looking through it, we have several different social media accounts, as well as avenues for the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, and then several different gaming companies such as Steam, Riot Games, and Sega, which can each be exploited in their own unique way for a type of social engineering attack. And so comparing the two types of graphs, we had surprisingly been able to find much more information than we had initially anticipated. The only items that we had not been able to find with this initial session had been the SB Nation account and the Yard Barker Sports newsletter. And so we're finally taking all the information that we found from our open source intelligence sessions, and to really illustrate the importance of data security, putting it into a type of social engineering attack. To best accomplish this, we're going to create a phishing email, which is a message meant to convince a victim to provide, well, not the only ways to go about it, personal identifying information, or to try to get them to download a type of malicious payload to mess with their computer or steal data from their computer. The central focus of this section really is, again, taking that information and seeing how it translates into a much more dangerous situation. So while we did include a malicious payload, our focus is primarily on the phishing email itself, as we feel it best illustrates what can be done with OSINT. If we focus too much on the payload, we felt that it would feel more like a pen testing engagement rather than a demonstration on social engineering. So looking at the actual email itself, there's a bit of a shortened or truncated version shown on the left just so that it can actually fit into the slide. To be able to get all of the different parts shown in that example to make it really look like a legitimate email, the email account that we had created for the purposes of phishing, we had actually signed it up for a Twitter account itself. Used one of the onboarding emails that it had received fairly shortly after, and more or less used it as a template. For what we're actually doing with it, we had noticed that there is a new paid subscription service called Twitter Blue, and figured with something so new and relatively unfamiliar, we could kind of take advantage of that in order to do a little bit of damage and to try to better convince them to download something. So looking at the actual payload itself, it really is more style than substance, so to speak. Shown in the script here, it is just creating a pop-up message, determining the content of that message, such as the fact that it has a yes or no response in that message, its title, its body, what kind it is, that being a warning, and then the actual script to run it. Now, to create the payload itself, we'd use the Lucky Strike tool. It's a tool that is able to obfuscate a malicious payload into Microsoft files, namely Word documents or Excel spreadsheets. So all we had to do was download the tool into our PowerShell in a Windows virtual machine, load our PowerShell script into the tool, and then allow it to convert it into an obfuscated file. So kind of looking at the results, you can see on the left there we had actually sent the email. Our fake person had noticed the email, looks legit, of course they had downloaded it. And then of course on the right they open the Excel file, it opens up the spreadsheet, and then you see that there's the malicious payload that we had described earlier with the warning message popping up.
So for our closing thoughts, given the limitations set by only having around a month to create, plan, and execute the project, we believe that we've still been able to come away with a project that we were satisfied with, were proud of, and had enjoyed making. While initially we had some concerns with the amount of data that was being made, we felt that it was still a fine amount given the week or so we had to create and analyze it. If we had done any more, the information found and exploited with OSINT may have felt less meaningful.
We really didn't want to kind of rely on hypotheticals or what ifs when working on this project and saying, well, it could be better, if we had the resources. But really, I think the thing that we took away from this project the most is that if we were able to find this amount of information and create this solid of a phishing email with an account that had really only been up for about a week and a half to 2 weeks, what would that look like for somebody who has had months, or in our cases, years and years of an online presence? What kind of personal information could be found about that?